Welcome to the July meeting of the Seneca County Industrial Development Agency. We have a quorum, so we're all set to go. First item on the agenda is approval of the IDA meeting minutes of May 5th. Everyone has a copy in their packet.
Yep.
Does anyone have any changes, comments, corrections?
I did.
Hearing none, I have a motion to approve.
So made.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the IDA financial statements for May. We did not have a meeting last month, so just a couple little highlights from the April financials. Basically, in terms of major income streams, in April, we did receive the $54,000 from Seneca County. Thank you for them. And the scepter fee of $31,000. In May, we received the Del Lago payment of $100,000. So income revenue is essentially on schedule. For expenses, really the only unusual or different expenses for last month was $11,000 for the audit fees, and then for cash payout for her leaving. Other than that, there's no unusual either income or expenses. Anything you'd like to add, Bob? I think we're right on track.
Maybe just if we looked at the May of 21 numbers compared to May of 22, we're beating those numbers. A big portion of that came from the $100,000, obviously. But our revenue flow is higher, and there's about a $70,000 difference between the 2 years. Bottom line.
So, any questions or comments on the financials? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Well, the next item on the agenda is the inducement for the 5S development project. Sarah, would you like to kick this off?
Yeah, so I'm just going to turn it right over to Vern, Laverne, and Bruce to speak about their project. You guys want to come up?
Speak over here a little bit.
Morning or this afternoon, Laverne Sessler, so I'm a representative of 5S Development, third generation Sessler family. I'm working here at Sessler Wrecking. This is my father, Vern Sessler, and Bruce, director of business development with Sessler Companies. So just some background, I think everybody's aware of Sessler Wrecking, but it was started by my grandfather back in 1958, so 63 years ago here in Waterloo. Since then, we've been headquartered pretty much solely in Seneca County. At this time, over the next year or so, the business of Sessler Wrecking is working on a transition into the third generation. The third generation, which is myself, my brother, and 3 of my cousins, who I'm here representing them. But as part of that, we're looking at continuing to grow the companies. Right now, within the third generation, we have the company Sessler Environmental Services, which is located up in Maston, New York. They have a facility up there on 20,000 square foot and 150 employees. And that's kind of part of this is we're looking at what's the best way to expand the Sessler Wrecking business. So we have our main office right now up on Route 96 with a maintenance facility and yard and everything. One of the biggest factors in growing the business is we're kind of maximizing our space right now as far as office employees. So we're looking at what's the best way to hire more office employees and retain and attract that talent. We looked at a couple different options over the last year and a half to 2 years. We've been going through options, getting estimates, pricing, and everything else. Everything from getting a satellite office out of state close to some of our work down in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, buying or building a new facility in the Rochester or Syracuse area, or closer to our environmental office up in Macedon. And what we've kind of made a big circle and come around to is we're hoping to stay in Waterloo and add on here. We find that, the continuity with the shop and office and everything being there would provide the best benefits to employees. The only problem that we're quickly realizing as we're going through the design and construction estimates is that's by far the most expensive option, is to add on to that office just in today's market and everything else. And that's sort of why we're here, is to request some of the different incentive programs and stuff from the IDA as far as the pilot, mortgage reporting tax and sales tax exemptions to help facilitate and make the office expansion more reality. That, Bruce or Ed want to add anything, or if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Vern, I have one. The number of employees you're gonna increase with this addition, do you have any idea how many that would be?
Yeah, so right now, Assessor Wrecking has 25 full-time office staff working out of that office. And then we have a total of around 100 employees. So that's split between the maintenance facility and then our guys in the field, a lot of which are from this area but travel for work around the Northeast. With the expansion, the building itself, we're adding 20 to 25 that still working on the design office spaces between, I think it's around 20 offices. We're looking at 5 to 10 cubicle spaces with room for expansion. With that, realistically over the next 3 years, we're looking at, an addition of 5 to 10 employees out of our main office. But that relates to, our field staff to office ratio is like 4 to 1. So in theory, more project managers,
Sure.
more work and field staff as well.
How much, I guess, available land do you have? Are you pretty much landlocked there? Or is there room to keep expanding and growing?
Yep.
Where you are?
So the plan would be for 5S Development, which is a third generation owned company, to purchase the existing office that's there, and then do the addition, as well as there's about a 20 or 30 acre parcel right next to it that would facilitate need to do another maintenance facility down the line, or plenty of room for.
Any other questions?
In terms of timing, if everything works out well, start this year, finish up next year?
Yeah, the ideal goal behind this guy would be to start it and hopefully get the building and closed by the winter. Don't know if that's a reality, but worst case scenario would be starting January, February of next year and construction in the spring season. As long as weather permits, as soon as possible. Just some background on that. Right now, we are maximizing our space, so it's every office and cubicle is full. So the people that we're hiring, it's you work remote for a while, kind of things.
Become not totally critical, but it is getting to the point where it's becoming a issue with recruitment too. Quality of workspace and everything, given that we're maxing out, and retention, of course. And I think if I don't mind me expanding on or touch on it lately, and I think it's important for the IDA to know, and I'm sure you do understand, but the vast majority, if not all of our work is performed, throughout, outside of Seneca County, but we like to keep, our expansion efforts right here locally in the community that the company was founded and grew up in. And as part of the team that as we worked through looked at our different options of other locations closer to where we work, and we still felt, a compelling argument to try to stay here with this expansion.
Other questions?
Have you gotten far enough along to be able to get some estimated bids on this big project? You say you'd like to get it going yet this fall. Are you far enough along with other entities to do that type of thing?
We are,
If it
we're probably taking a design build approach. Got bids for that and talked specifically with a couple of companies to get it pretty finalized. So, we're almost at the stage. Here's the price. Here's the 50% drawings of what we want, and it's pretty much right to the stage before it starts costing a lot of money.
It always goes smoother from here out, so I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
How much money you got?
Never hit us.
Never gets more complicated.
One question, besides the history of the company in Waterloo and the desire to keep the connection to the community, what were some of the other considerations you had to think about when looking at, say, the Macedon office or an alternative, say, closer to where much of your work might be?
Like Bruce said, a lot of it's employee, attracting and retaining. Especially here, Rochester and Syracuse, there's a higher pool of talent there. We do seem to attract, more applications and stuff out of our Macedon office for different jobs. What we've, even with traveling with work, a lot of the guys, our jobs are 4 to 5 hours away on average. So getting offices down there, what we would like to do is try to keep it all centralized, keep the congruity with the company between the financial staff, accounting, business development, the shop that's there, the yard, kind of keep all that staff as one, and keep kind of that sense of community, I guess, in the office. Once we start splitting it up eventually I think we might get to a point where we have to, but you lose some efficiencies once you start splitting.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
So, hearing the, more information on the proposal, is there anyone who would like to discuss this further? Seems like, a decent project and well worth.
I'll have to say up front, I obviously have a conflict here in a connection with the Sesslers, so I'm not going to vote. But, I'll say obviously a long-term good company in this marketplace that has done a lot, both business-wise and contributed to economic development here, as well as how much the families have done. So a good company, they've got viable comments as to what their alternatives are, but certainly would like to see them stay here.
Yes. Maybe even add to another pink tractor or something.
That's right. They'd have to, they're not going to go. They'd have to move that tractor.
They'd have to move the tractor.
I don't know if they got anything that would move that.
So, since there's no other discussion, we'll right to the approval of the resolution. Just a quick description.
Just for reference, so this inducement resolution accepts the application and allows staff to schedule a public hearing. The plan would be to get something scheduled, maybe end of July or something, August, with potential final approval before the board in likely September. So this does not give final approval to the project or anything, just want to make that clear to you all. There will be more information distributed as we get a chance to talk more. Are there any other questions about this resolution or the application?
Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the inducement resolution?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
Kelly?
Mr. Russo,
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Keim,
Same.
Mr. Bruce Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Tom Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
Mr. Lapp,
Yes.
Mr. Trout, absent, motion carried.
Next on our agenda is discussion of the next inducement resolution that you have for Seneca Garden Solar LLC.
So I'm gonna hand this one over to Liza and Genevieve to introduce themselves and talk about their project a little bit.
I did bring a visual just if you're interested. It's just what I'm gonna speak about. It's just the main points because I do throw out some numbers. Alrighty, so I'm Liza Sheps. I'm a business development manager at Nexium, and I'm joined today by Genevieve Craig, our Craig Damon. I find it's helpful to give a little bit of an introduction of Nexium, who we are and what we do, and then some background about this project. So Nexium was founded in 2007 by two Army veterans in Boston, Massachusetts. We have since grown and have expanded to have solar and storage projects in 13 states. In New York State, we became very active about 7 years ago and have remained so, having over 350 megawatts of projects either currently operating or in developments, late stages of development like this project. What makes Nexium unique from other developers in the solar industry is that we design, build, own, and operate the facilities for the lifetime of the project, having our own construction management group, asset management group, and maintenance group as well. And we've grown a really good reputation because we are the long-term owners and therefore will be maintaining these projects for the lifetime of the facility. So speaking to this project specifically, Seneca Gardens Solar LLC, it's located on Garden Street Extension in Seneca Falls. It's a 5 megawatt AC single axis tracker system, about 27 acres of fenced acreage. It is a fully permitted project. You'll see on the last slide that I provided that the approval dates date back to early 2021. The reason for that is for two reasons. One, NYSERDA, the megawatt block New York Sun program, filled up last May and therefore was paused for the year and recently reopened on June 7th. So for that reason, the project is now moving forward again. And then also for NYSERDA, there was a cost sharing order between solar projects, and that order was released just this past April. So now it's in effect. So now this project is fully permitted. And now we're in the financing stages of the project, preparing for financing and construction of the facility. Anything else? Add to that intro?
That covers that we are seeking a payment in lieu of taxes from the IDA as well as a sales tax exemption. And we have requested a 20-year pilot, which I understand is a decrease from your solar policy. And that's just because the life of these projects aren't expected to be 30 plus years. So
got a couple questions. So you say it's a 30-year project. Isn't the useful lifespan of a solar panel typically geared at 20 years?
So the solar project is the difference between the panel. So we have our own operations and maintenance team. We have this room in our headquarters with all these screens. It looks like they could be selling stocks or like launching a spaceship. What they're doing is remote monitoring all of our projects. So if there is a broken monitor, we're able to mobilize on that effort, and we're able to track the capacity of that monitor. So that if a panel is not performing as well, we're able to replace that. So the specific equipment does get replaced throughout the project lifespan.
I think the technology is also getting better. So we are targeted to be longer projects.
Second question. There's a lot of concern that because the primary manufacturing is in China and all this trade stuff goes by, are you in danger of not having the panels that you need for this project?
So we do have our own procurement group as part of our engineering, procurement, and construction group. So yes, it's been a very turbulent year in terms of supply tariffs, supply chain, and sourcing. We do have all of this figured out, and it is with this project, the sales tax exemption we need before we're able to actually purchase for this specific project. With that said, we do have agreements in place with the manufacturers. So we have allocated panels for this project already.
If I can ask one third question. So your choice of siting in our area, is it because of transmission lines, proximity to transmission lines?
So we have a very complex screening process. We look at the physical characteristics of the site, topography, size of the parcel, wetlands, all those different environmental features. And then we also look in terms of utility infrastructure, proximity to three-phase electrical lines, the substation capacity, and other features like that.
So NICEAG's already signed off, they can accept this large generation.
Yes, we are already in the process of an interconnection agreement with them. We've already gone through the studies. We have a full interconnection cost, and we have made the first large deposit on that.
It's a good project.
Thank you. Me too.
How many people will you have when it's done? A lot.
How
How
many?
many people will actually be involved in maintaining this? Once you're up and running, you do this pretty remotely. Is there many people doing anything relative to this facility and maintaining it? Are they located here? Are they located and come service it from out of the area?
Yes, so as part of our operations and maintenance group, we have specific operations and maintenance plans for each project. And we have contractors that are local for that work. It is somewhat minimal throughout the course of the year, but we will have someone come about 3 times a year to mow or whatnot. And we do, I know there's some local labor aspect of pilot agreement, but on top of that, we do source power contractors locally, with the exception of a little bit higher up our asset management and operations maintenance.
We have a list of what counties you're in New York State now. We have a list of that.
As far as development,
What counties have you located facilities in that are already built and put them in place in New York State?
I can give you a handful.
And I don't need you, if you can get them to Sarah, that'd be
Sure.
great. It'd be a question I'd be asking. If you could just let her know what counties you've built in now and have ongoing projects.
You have a customer for what electricity you're gonna generate, and you just go into NICEAG's grid and they'll sell it as green electricity?
So there's a few ways of structuring these projects. We do pass along the energy credits to the local within the same territory of NICEAG. So we have that agreement in place, and we'll be moving forward with the energy sales of that project.
So local entities do have an ability to negotiate and buy certain kilowatts, certain hours.
Yes,
Or-
the-
Accrediting, yes.
Can you tell us what the amount of decommissioning bond is? Is it a percentage of the total money invested, or is it a fixed amount?
as part of our permitting with the town, we have a decommissioning agreement in place with them. At the time we pull the building permit, we'll be putting on a 30 bond with the town. I looked this up this morning. I believe I can get you that number right now. I know it's up on my computer. We did follow the NYSERDA guidelines for that, which is how we came to that number with the town.
Isn't it reasonable to assume, once you've got this infrastructure, that you'll just keep replacing the panels? Once you've got the interconnection, you've got a 30-year targeted lifespan, but do you expect to continue beyond that?
That's an interesting question, and I think that's something that the industry is figuring out. Because these projects are right now slated to be 30, 40 years, and we haven't had solar for these type of projects for 30, 40 years, so it's hard to say. With that said, there are different incentives from the NYSERDA and whatnot that do only last that long. So I'm sure as we get down the road with the project, we'll have to reevaluate, is it practical? Is it practical to move this forward beyond that? But the decommissioning plan we have in place does prescribe exactly what will get removed from the site and everything like that. Because even if they're not operating, there's a lot of expensive equipment on the site.
I would just add to that, I think the point being that it's very market driven, and with the state's goals of achieving 70% renewables by 2030, and then that goal progressing, the reduction of fossil fuel power plants, that renewables are here to stay, and it's just gonna really determine how they evolve.
I was gonna say, this property should get more valuable going into the future.
Hopefully, if the technology keeps growing it, which I think it will.
Well, that brings up, are you renting the property from the Barberis or are you buying it?
It's a long-term ground lease.
So I'm not as familiar with the property, although from the map that you provided, obviously looks like there's residential, whether that's the Burberry's or not, but are you doing anything for aesthetic mitigation, like the cut down on the visual sight lines and whatnot?
This is a large piece of our permitting with the town. We did some visual assessments and did put together a landscaping plan to augment the existing natural screening in the area. The house that you do see there is owned by this same landowner, and the adjacent neighbors are pretty well screened from this, but we are adding, we do have an approved landscaping plan that's very specific that will be putting in as part of our construction for that reason.
One more question. So you've got enough footprint there. Do you have any notion now that you might expand the number of panels that you got there? Got the interconnection.
No, we do not have any plan to expand in this area for a few reasons. One, the NYSERDA maximum project size for this category of projects is 5 megawatts AC. Look at that. There's also pretty stringent zoning laws in this area. So about max coverage, we were looking into doing a co-located project down the street. And a co-located project, meaning exactly what you just described, having a secondary project, but it wasn't feasible given the zoning in the area, and the cost of interconnection is very expensive for these projects in NYSEG territory.
Yeah, it's a big cost. Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you. This project, like the previous project, is for, the approval is for going out for a public hearing and further negotiations of the pilot. It's just first step in the process. Add to that or?
No?
No? So any other discussion?
So just to clarify that,
Yes.
approving this resolution does not lock in the terms of the pilot. It only sets a public hearing for the project.
Correct. The only resolution for any project that really solidifies any type of pilot terms is the final resolution. Although, in order to do a public hearing, we need to enter in pilot negotiations and conduct a cost benefit analysis, which is based off of an estimated pilot amount. So obviously, I will keep you all apprised of any developments in that regard so that we can make sure we're on the same page moving forward. Are there any other questions related to that?
Not, could I have a motion to approve the investment resolution?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Kelly?
Mr. Russo,
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Kine,
Yes.
Mr. Bruce Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Tom Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley,
Yes.
Mr. Lau,
Yes.
Mr. Trout, absent motion carried.
Next item on the agenda, an update from the chamber.
Certainly. So the chamber is coming off a couple of big events that we've updated this committee before. One was or the most recent was our legislative luncheon, where we brought all three state elected officials for Seneca County to the table. Had a very productive meeting with them. It is always good to have them here in our community and listening to our constituency. So I thought all three did a great job of answering questions from the public and talking a little bit more about some of the key issues that happened over the this past legislative session. So that was one. We did hold a tourism summit for the tourism-based businesses in the county as well recently, and had a great turnout, great discussion, had some really excellent local business owners, leaders that helped provide some key talking points, advice to tourist-based businesses in our community. Obviously, it is a big part of our economy. So very, very busy past month for the chamber. I can tell you that one of the biggest things that came out of our legislative luncheon, and it is something that our public policy committee at the chamber has been talking about for some time, is regarding unemployment insurance and the state's unemployment insurance fund. And there is a statewide coalition of business organizations that are advocating the state to spend at least some of the money, the federal COVID relief funding that the federal government has given the state to pay down some of the debt on our unemployment insurance fund. It is a big issue. I think all of you, if you haven't already heard about it, will continue to hear as we move into the next year, because as the state is in debt to the federal government to the tune of about $8 billion, it has an impact on all small businesses in our community in terms of the rates that we can expect to see. So that's one of the key areas that the chamber will be looking into. And then finally, One Seneca continues to take shape. I know Sarah had mentioned it in her report as well, but we continue to meet every week, Thursday morning, 10 to 10:30, to discuss a bevy of projects in the county. Most recently, we've been focused on broadband, the redevelopment of the Willard campus, among others. And I will just say, in lieu of having Mitch here or Don here, the broadband committee did meet yesterday. The county has set up a specific committee to study and to put forward ideas for broadband, building out broadband in our area. We heard that the state has come back and indicated there are around 700 properties within our county that have no access to broadband. And so the hope is that we can build out the infrastructure needed to equip those properties with access to high-speed broadband.
Isn't that part of the federal program?
So there is several different programs you can tap into for funding. They would cover a portion of the cost, but the county has to have its own plan to figure out how they're going to pay for that infrastructure. And so what we are advocating at One Seneca is to spend those federal COVID relief funds, or a portion of those, in this manner to bring broadband into the county. That is certainly going to be up to the supervisors here to figure out how this.
What kind of numbers are you talking about?
So we heard interesting figures, have been thrown around, about $1.5 million per 150 or so users to build out the infrastructure. So
that's subsidizing like OTTC to go out on poll?
Well, you certainly would enter a partnership into an agreement with an ISP provider of that magnitude, but
So we're subsidizing them to run fiber out to these people.
well, in what we heard, the program that we heard, there is a share, there is a partnership in that process. So the ISP in this instance would put a portion of money up as well. Wayne County is
$100,000 per customer. That's all.
Yeah, we have an example to our north. Wayne County is undergoing this similar project. They have more properties that are in need of broadband, that do not have access to broadband. And I believe theirs is around, I think it's been reported $8 to $9 million project. So it's a significant investment. But we certainly think broadband is a very important economic development tool. So that's what we have.
Thank you, Jeff. See, Don Trout is not here. Sure, if there's anything that you know or you have anything else on the county?
Just that the county continues to push for an in-person meeting from the state officials to come down and tour the Willard site. They have committed to such, but to this point, we've been given no indication of when that is. But we are certainly pushing for state representatives to actually come and physically lay eyeballs on the Willard campus and meet with our local elected officials. Actually, one other thing. The county is undergoing a housing study or has started the process of a housing study. And we heard that there have been 3 proposals received on that project. And by all indications, all 3 of them are very strong. So I think the next step now is for the Board of Supervisors to sift through those proposals and move that process along and into the stage of actually studying our housing issues.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the quarterly report. Sure.
So I guess I'll kick off a little bit with Willard. Jeff's already touched on it. But obviously, just for you all as a reference, where that stands currently is the state owns the site. And at this point, as a community, we're sort of waiting on them to figure out what the plan is, whether they would want to transfer that ultimately for local control or whether they would want to continue to own it and sort of spearhead potential redevelopment there. So we're trying to figure out what the next steps are in that process. And go ahead, Ben.
Do they have any ideas what they might use those buildings? Are they talking about the prison buildings or talking about that newer office building that they are?
I think everything. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
And then I know that there's a consultant that's been hired. They're still sort of evaluating.
They're doing like a economic market analysis of the area. They're not even really at the point of like highest and best use for the property. I think that based on the way New York State operates with these types of things, I think they would hopefully look to the local community to guide where we would see the future of the redevelopment happening. The state right now is really trying to figure out what are the employment trends, what are the sort of industry trends, health factors in the community, things like that.
Are they still running the daycare in the auditorium there?
There is a drug treatment counseling service that's still being run, but I'm not aware if the daycare is still.
I don't know.
One jewel is their auditorium building, and they were running a daycare out of there. But if they don't have any people working there, maybe they don't need daycare.
Yeah, I don't know. Bruce.
Sarah and Jeff both have been been part of a One Seneca group that looked at this issue of what could be done with Willard. We had someone who's familiar with the real estate development world that would include this site. And this individual simply said that there is a process that can be undertaken sooner rather than later, where someone could do the analysis of the site. It would cost some money, but rather than wait for the state to come up with a plan that might not fit our needs, there would be an option for the people in the county to actually develop a plan and present that to the state. But rather than say, what will the state want to do with it, we could say to the state, what do we want to do? And, I don't know if the IDA is the entity or the board of supervisors of the entity, but there is definitely a mechanism and an avenue to get proactive and out in front of this. That's my neck of the woods down there. I look at the village of Ovid and what could occur in a positive economic development sense to that part of the county by having a fairly sensible and appropriate plan that we develop ourselves. It's really a matter of who's going to take the lead on it.
And I don't disagree with you, Bruce, and I did not mean for my comments to sound like we're trying to be reactive. I think in some ways there's a balancing act of, let's invest all of the money that we have to do a really comprehensive, essentially RFP and study of the site that we would put out to bid. I mean, I think ultimately that's where we would want to end up is essentially a design RFP that we put out and say, okay, here's what we're seeing for the site. Who wants to come and build this? But we have had in some of our conversations that we've had with the state up till now, we have made indications of some of the things that One Seneca has talked about and that some of the other folks in the community have talked about potentially wanting to see at that site. So at least as of right now, they have an idea of what our vision could be. It hasn't been fleshed out yet.
How many acres?
It's like north of 300, like 380 something, I think.
Ben, you mentioned the auditorium is the gem, but actually it's the waterfront.
I was going to say,
That's the asset, but it's huge. There's significant waterfront, which is the sort of the parent really that would bring in someone with.
And the caretaker's house is still there in good shape.
Just a few other comments. I mean, the person that spoke to the One Seneca group said that, there are some potential costs to anyone that might want to develop it in terms of demolition, reclamation, remediation. So it's the kind of thing that is a little more complicated once you scratch the surface. And I personally think we ought to get ahead on it and find a way to take the lead to move the needle proactive.
Yeah, I guess taking the lead, it would depend on what that means.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we've been there.
Yeah. Well, I know.
So I agree with you. We want to do it the right way.
Yeah.
I think it is a good potential, but think for what we're getting into.
Okay. Sure.
And what state agency is essentially doing this? Who is?
Well, so the Department of Corrections owns the site. But Empire State Development, the state's economic development agency, have been the ones, at least as far as I know, leading the discussions, and they're the ones working with the consultant. So we'll see, I guess, how that relationship plays out. There have been some sort of staffing changes with promotions and things sort of regionally in Empire State Development. I don't think that's necessarily impacting or delaying anything. But I think one of the keys is to get the state officials, committed to come here for the visit, like Jeff said, and be able to actually walk around the site and see it. And then our hope would be that the state would help contribute some funding for, you know, potentially demolition or winterization or whatever might need to be done at the property immediately before it's sort of ready to be sold off or transferred.
And they would demo based on what? A plan that someone has in place for what that should look like, or what they just want to come in and demo, or?
I think in the immediate future, I mean, there are buildings that
Sure.
would appear that they are falling in on
Yeah,
themselves.
there's a lot of them that are beyond safe.
Yeah, and so I think that would be the hope at the forefront, is to get those buildings, don't walk away without, leaving the county and its taxpayers on the hook for all of that.
Eliminate the liabilities.
And yes, so you got that, you probably still have environmental issues in the buildings themselves. So to make it viable, there's a lot of stuff that would have to get done.
And I don't necessarily anticipate that the state would take responsibility for all of those items, which is where, what Bruce is talking about comes into play, having sort of a comprehensive study done that says, okay, similar to what we did with Hillside, although I think we could go a little bit further with this. But essentially bring in a firm that says, okay, out of what's existing, here's what the state of it is, here's what the estimated cost would be. Here are, sort of our goals. If they're like particular buildings or things that we'd want to see preserved, like, for the historic aspects, if there are particular types of development you want to see, that would involve all of those things.
All stuff we should pursue, and I'm in favor of that. It's just, I think you're going on the right road to the extent that you can get the state involved with it and be a supportive player in it, the more likely it will end up someplace. If they just say, yeah, it's great, we'd like to see something done, tell us when you get there.
Right.
When the representatives come, how much can we essentially embed our people in the process?
Which is why, you really want to push for the state representatives to come and see this.
Yeah, you're going down.
Yeah, if you can really embed one or two people in there, it becomes definitely a joint. Then we can get a lot more say.
Absolutely. Make them see the campus, make them see the buildings that are falling in, make them see the water frontage. These are all things that I think will endear them to this property more so than over a phone or a Zoom conference.
The south end of the county, we're transferring the Boy Scout camp, trying to make it into a local attraction, because they were really terrified of some outside entity coming in to make it into a luxury park of some description. Just based on their fears, I would imagine that, as Bruce was saying, the value is in the lakefront, and that there are developers who want to come in. They probably wouldn't want the whole 300 acres and all the other liabilities, but certainly are a lot of money who want to make some sort of a resort attraction.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be, from all the discussions we've had, one of the potentially strong possibilities for redevelopment would be a hotel resort type of thing, maybe a marina. And then, potentially there was discussion of some of the inland areas being used for food and ag processing, related to the craft beverage and wine industries, cold storage, that type of thing, or potentially housing developments, because obviously there need to be, infrastructure put in order to, support a hotel resort and marina. You could tap into some of those investments for some of these other ancillary things. So there's a lot of potential there. It's just a matter of really determining what is best here, what everybody wants to see in the community. But ultimately, a redevelopment project, if it was successful, would touch on a lot of the issues that were laid out in the strategic plan as needing to be addressed: infrastructure, housing, those kinds of things.
The potential.
Mm-hmm. So aside from that, but obviously, great discussion and something we're keeping a close eye on. Aside from that, our business retention program is going really well. Obviously, things were a little slow to start at the beginning of this year, my maternity leave, but we have since made up for it. We've done 36 business visits year to date, so we're well over halfway toward our goal. I'm actually hoping that if we continue on this trajectory, we can hit 60 business visits instead. our project pipeline is, as strong as it's ever been. We've got 31 projects in the pipeline currently. I would say that there are 7 that we would expect to see applications from this year. 2 of them were approved today. So that is, a good sign. Moving forward, we do have a couple of ongoing projects from last year. So Best Made Products, we've done final approval for pilot and the property sale. They're working with our underwriters on processing a loan application. And then Wilkins RV is planning to move forward with a new site in Junius and will be submitting a revised application for consideration over the next month or 2. Aside from that, some things to give you all a quick update on. The application period closed for our grant and development specialist position, which is essentially what we're using to replace Pat Jones with her retirement. We had 13 applicants. That field has been narrowed down now to 3. We'll be doing in-person interviews in the middle of this month. If nothing pans out, obviously we will reopen applications again. We'll keep you all posted. Our ideal would be to have somebody for the board to approve at our August board meeting. We'll likely begin the search for our 9th board member sometime this fall. It's gotten put on hold a little bit just because of scheduling the interview committee and everything with the Board of Supervisors. We participated in the Chamber Small Business Week panel. So this was a couple months ago, but actually some of the projects that we're seeing are leads as a result of the participation there. So the goal of that panel was to talk to businesses about what types of economic development resources are available in the community. The Chamber did a great job putting it together. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to be a part of it. Let's see, aside from that, you all received a copy of the link. So Seneca County was being featured in Trade and Industry Development's quarterly magazine. They did a special section on agriculture and food processing. So if you haven't read it yet, I encourage you to do so. And then a quick update on the Fast New York grant program from the state. Empire State Development recently put out a survey. They are in the process of trying to design that grant program and determine what types of things need to be supported in terms of getting sites shovel ready. So we did respond to that survey. They expect applications to be launched sometime this fall or winter. We'll keep you all apprised of that. I think that's it for the quarterly report. Are there any questions?
I wanted to say that placement looked great, and, especially there were many other locations around the country that were cited, and I thought it really great for us.
Yeah, I mean that, earned media is always wonderful. We'll see what kind of traction we get from it. It's a national magazine. I don't know what interest it may or may not generate, but certainly worth, the time to respond to their inquiry. So.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Any other business?
No.
No. There's no need for an executive session for today. So last thing is, we have a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No, motion carried. So we're done with the meeting.